just tells you they're breaking the seal each time. So make sure you're following what the scripture says, not what a lot of commentaries are trying to bring out. I'm not sure why they're doing that or where they get it from. So here he breaks. Now here's the third one. He cuts or whatever he does, breaks the seal that has it attached. This is hot glue. They are attached. You'd have to rip them off to get them off of there. That's not what they used. They would have used some type of clay or wax. And so they would have come off easier. And the scroll material would have been different as well. And so you wouldn't have had what this has done. It has seeped in and left a mark, or it rips the scroll up. That's not going to happen. So I'm just trying to be practical with you. You understand this was not an uncommon occurrence. It's just what they did. It was the only way to secure a last will and testament, or whatever the information was you wanted sealed up in here. You had to do it in a way that people couldn't cheat and get into it ahead of time. So an authority came and verified, yep, that's my insignia ring in the seal as it hardened up. And then, so you can break that. You can break that. Well, who's authorizing that?
In this one, it's always Jesus.
It's Jesus, because he's the only one worthy to break the seals and to open the scroll. So it's what he's actually doing. So the third one's been broken, and where did this third breaking take place, as you saw in verse 1 and verse 3?
Heaven.
In heaven and around the throne. So it's a heavenly scene that's going on with the scroll. What did the third living creature command then again?
Come.
Verse 1, verse 3, verse 5, it's come. It's a present, middle imperative. It's be going forth yourself. The present tense, be going. The imperative is commanded. The middle voice, it's something they're doing on their own. You need to be going. Horse rider. So he's being authorized. Jack Ebner's position is the white horse, the red horse, the black horse, the pale green horse are the same rider, changing how he's functioning. And it's symbolized with those horses that are going on there and what those colors kind of represent. And so here you come down to the next question. What did John command the seven churches to behold or to take notice of?
Black.
Okay, black horse. So what might the rider of a black horse represent? I gave you a couple of verses. You'd go, well, that didn't really tell me anything. But what did you see in Job 3:5? Two words that stand out in there regarding with around this idea of black.
Darkness.
Okay, there'd be darkness, but it's gloom
Terror.
and terror are both mentioned with that idea. So you kind of start looking for that in Scripture. When you see it here, he explains you what's going to take place. There's some kind of mournful oppression coming upon them. There's something happening. We're going to try to explain that, and we may take another hour to get through the third seal. But we'll take it if we need it. So something's happening using the color black representing this horse, but I believe the same rider is on each horse for 4 horses. Then you get the scene in heaven of the dead martyrs. You get the scene on earth as the panicked earth dwellers. And then finally the breaking of the 7th seal, you get the judgment of God. So here's the, anything you guys wrote besides gloom, doom, terror, as far as what they might represent. I put mournful oppression, and I'm going to explain to you what I think is really going on here.
Somewhere I got the idea of a bad economy.
Okay, you got that probably from me, because we'll explain why that fits.
Oh,
You said mournful.
I said mournful oppression. You're mourning over the oppression that's coming upon you.
Right.
So, as we keep going with here, how is this writer described? Still in verse 5. What did he possess? Okay, a pair of scales in his hand. That's one word in the Greek, 22:18, and it literally is a yoke or a what? Coupling is what they, is that? Okay, that would kind of describe what they would put oxen in. That yoke that the oxen draw, they're pushing that. And then it's centered, connected in the center to whatever they're pulling. Whether it's a wagon or it's some type of a, what do you do to the ground? Plowing or whatever else you may be doing. But it was a yoke that went out and it was tied in the middle and they would push on that. That's why they called it a balance beam, because it had to be balanced between those two animals to get an equal pull. Otherwise your rows would look like this. And so they tell you never to put what two animals together? Unequally yoked in 2 Corinthians 6. You don't put a donkey and an oxen together. It doesn't work.
Didn't you say a long time ago that it's
I
an
did.
older oxen and usually a younger, so that's
Because the oxen work the same.
even at different sizes?
Well, it's not going to be so young that it can't do the work.
Right,
So it's inexperienced, would probably be a better word even than younger. But but it's two oxen and they're going to do the same thing. So yes, thank you. You guys are checking up on all the stuff I've said before. I have to be careful.
You tell us to.
Linda?
I found also 2 elements to work as 1 unit.
Okay, if it's oxen, if it's animals, and that's why I put on there, I wrote in stuff. Used for oxen, servitude, business, it can be a scale. It is the same idea of that balance.
I was just gonna say, so it's not scale like we would think of scale then.
It could mean that, and
Purpose.
it leans toward that with a lot of writers because they think, and this is where I'll say the first thing, they think this yoke is tied in with the wheat and the barley. That they're putting it on a scale. And I've even said that at times. But the more I studied it again for a few hours this morning, because Paul asked me a question. I don't know if he's going to watch this. He probably will. And I got an answer, and I'm hoping I can share it at his bedside in the next few days when he's coherent enough, finally gets off of his drugs, and isn't in severe pain. No, I shouldn't be mocking. He'll watch this. He'll get angry at me. Because I watched my wife go through it, and some of you have watched your own spouses go through it, and so you understand. But the difference is verse 5 is the scales, verse 6 is the wheat and the barley. And so we'll get down to that, and I'll explain to you why the scales have nothing to do with the wheat and the barley. Even if you use it as a balance, they have nothing to do with them, and you'll see it in the text. Our tendency is to get our answers from commentaries, study Bibles, Jack's translation. Don't do that. Go first into your concordance, look up and get the basic meanings of it, then go into Vines, which is the next one you're able to access because it's still easily done with English, and you can follow the numbers. They use the number you got out of Strong's. You track it down in Vines. Sometimes it's a little harder to find because they don't use the same word. But you keep looking, you'll find it. I do that a lot. Sometimes I have to look up the Greek or the Hebrew word to find it. It's so well hidden. So don't misunderstand. I know it's frustrating at times. But and they have a concordance or a listing in the back where you can actually look up the word, the Greek words. So I'll know by looking up that Greek word if it's even in Vines, because it's not exhaustive. And so I try to do the best I can to get his input. I trust a lot of what he does, but I don't believe everything he says. And so then you'll look into, and this is the one I talked about last week. This is Bauer, Art, and Gingrich. This is a Greek lexicon, since we're in Revelation and we're in Greek. This you need a little more knowledge of Greek, at least to be able to recognize the word. And then you can get into some other books that are also very useful. This is another lexicon I use a lot, Analytical Greek Lexicon. For you, I'm going to Strong's or to the exhaustive, because I want to know what it says, and I write that answer down, because that's what you're going to give me. But then I go into Vines. I usually go here first. And this is how I confirm that I'm in the right word in Vines. But there's a lot of sources that I haven't even touched. This is what I'm trained in. This is what I was comfortable with. There have been books that have come out since then. Mark Barrett just told me one the other day. I said, I didn't even know they had a book like that. So there's stuff out there you can find online, especially. They'll keep adding those to your repertoire. But when you come in here, you want to look at it and realize it's a yoke, a balance, and it can be used in a variety of ways. So why does this writer, don't go to wheat and barley, why is this writer told, where are we told that he's carrying scales?
Don't know.
Doesn't it have something to do,
Okay, go ahead, Ken.
doesn't it have something to do with justice?
Okay, that would fit in really well, and that actually fits with the word that's going to show up.
I was gonna say control.
Control.
You know, you can control
Okay,
something.
all right, good. Jim?
It's to somehow measure out something, I would think, in that.
Okay, if you go to that part of it as being a tool for measuring, but we tend to do that because of the wheat and barley, and I'm going to show you why you shouldn't do that. But it can go to that direction. So when you're looking at this, you back up and you say, okay, white horse, red horse, black horse. What do your Bibles all tell us the black horse represents?
Famine.
Famine. Do you see famine in verses 5 and 6? No. Do you see famine in verse 8?
Yes.
Yes. So famine is in the fourth seal breaking, it's not in the third seal. But yet, I bet you almost every one of your Bibles says famine here. They're not observing the text, they're passing on what they've been taught. So that's where you want to be careful not to do that, Bev.
Well, maybe they're just giving it a shallow overlook, because I would look at that and think famine initially.
Right.
Because of the price of the food, that's what you're thinking.
But these people, Strong's originally, and then what they've done, Vines and people like that, do not take a shallow look at Scripture.
They know better.
And so they need to look at what it's actually saying. Linda?
But the thing that I saw was they're going to control the commerce.
Okay,
They will give each person a portion
right.
of something.
So here's the commerce represent, 4 things are brought up: wheat, barley, oil, wine. What of those 4 are staples in that day and age?
Wheat, oil, and wine.
All of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, you'll find people in your study Bibles, they'll say, well, the first 2 are staples and the last 2 are kind of luxuries. That's not true at all, but I saw a lot of that in some commentaries today. I kept looking for some things because I was trying to confirm. When I take a stance that isn't normal, I go try to find out and see if other people can prove me wrong. So I listened to them. I looked up Ryries. I looked up MacArthur's. I looked those up. But most of those are really skimpy, and sometimes they don't even talk about the things I'm looking for, which they can't. I mean, they don't have enough room. But I'm trying to evaluate myself. I'm trying to say, okay, give me your best shot. Prove me wrong with what I'm seeing in the text with observation, in the grammar. And so initially, though, the first thing I saw, which you can see very easily, is the scales given to the writer are not the same thing in verse 5 as the wheat and barley in verse 6. They're separated by some words. It doesn't say he was given a pair of scales to weigh out wheat and barley, and that would connect them. So you want to notice, okay, how's it being said? What's being said here? I want to pick up on that when I'm looking at it. But let me keep answering questions, and I'll see if I can make more sense out of this. So let me give you a passage first off. 1 Kings 12:4. This is Old Testament. I understand that. But many words are used similarly. 1 Kings chapter 12. And the first and seconds are all together in the Old Testament. So if you can find 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles, you can kind of look around in there and figure out where you're at. But when you get to 1 Kings 12:4, it reads, your father made our yoke. You think that's the same kind of yoke? Yes. Your father made our yoke hard. Now therefore lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke which he put upon us, and we will serve you. How is yoke being used there?
To indicate work, it sounds like.
Okay. Burden, labors put upon, and who's in the context? This is Rehoboam. Came out when Jeroboam was. Okay, they're having this debate. It was King Solomon also that's involved there. They sat and called him Rehoboam and called assembly and spoke to. Okay, so Jeroboam speaking to Rehoboam, and he's saying, your father. He's going back to probably Solomon, who put this weight on them. But the idea is, here you see the word being used in a way of putting hard labors. So if I take that back to Revelation, I say, okay, what if it's that? Why is this guy being given a yoke? In order to enslave, put hard labors on people, be in control of them, dominate them. Do you see what's happening in our country right now? I'm not saying it's worldwide, and I'm not saying it's the end of end times, but there's some interesting things going on. What are they doing with our economics? What are they starting to do to us? Okay, they're destroying it, but they're making things harder. They're not trying to fix it because they know right away all they have to do is tell the oil companies, no regulations, go pump as much as you want to pump, get us out of this. That's all they have to tell them, and you would find within a matter of a short period, because as soon as they started doing that, the oil prices would drop all over the world, because they'd all be fearful they're going to lose the market. So right there it would drop, just for saying that. Then you could start fixing it. So right now, they have put hard labors on us, and their goal is not $5. because they haven't reached their goal. What's their goal? Stop using oil, gasoline, diesel, stop using it. And what are people doing? Biting the bullet, spending more money, and doing what they want to do, because they did this right into the summer. So what are they going to have to do now?
Raise it some more.
Yep. And they're going to have to go up, and now some are talking $10 a gallon. When are you going to stop driving? Someday they don't have an option. I don't have any other way to get around. And come wintertime, I'm not riding a bike. Even with studded tires. And training wheels with studded tires. Or whatever else it may take. So this one verse kind of brings that out a little bit, just to give you an example. Oh, I thought you had a question. Question?
I said we'll have to get sleighs and horses.
Sleighs and horses. Yeah, but where do you get how do you feed the horses? Hay, and how do you get the hay?
And think of the pollution.
Pollution. So you asked somebody like Paul, who might watch this, about hay prices. I just saw a half quart of firewood. It was split and dry. You probably just drove by it too. $250. 1 quart of firewood, $500 is the price for that.
Wow.
And this is June. Who's buying firewood? Guess what the price is going to do when it actually gets to September, October? So you can see the hardship that's coming around because somebody's in control, and they went from a peace-loving white horse to a war-causing red horse to an economic dictatorship. And this is what we're going to explain with the verse 6. Let me get back to the questions because I know I'll miss things. Who declares what the price of grain will be? A voice where?
In the center of your four living.
Okay, so whose voice is this? We see it in 7:17 again, so probably it is
Christ.
Christ. The Lamb is what 7:17 says. That's the best guess. There aren't too many options in the center, in front of the living, or in the middle of the living creatures. So we guess that that's who it is. And what's his voice proclaiming? If it's Jesus Christ, what is he proclaiming?
A quart
Quart
of wheat, 3 quarts of barley,
For
denarius.
a denarius. So who's setting the price of the wheat and the barley?
Jesus Christ.
Not the writer.
Oh,
That's kind of interesting. See, this is just things that are in the text. And to make you stop and just ask yourself, what am I looking at? Stop and reevaluate. Don't let anybody tell me what's going on here. Don't even read Jack's old notes. You just have to relook at it, which is what I did this morning, trying to get this back into my brain. A quart of wheat, 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. Barley was a poor man's food. Less nutritious, but more of it. So if you had a family, it would go farther. So you looked up the 2 words. What's a quart?
wait,
Oh, sorry.
is he setting the price though, or is he just commenting, like drawing your attention to it?
Good question. What do you get from observation?
Well, I guess he is, because then at the end, when he says, don't, of the verse, don't damage the oil and wine, that does make you think he's in.
Okay, so there you get a command out of it.
Okay.
So he seems to be setting the price. So what's the word for quart? Okay, so it's a koinex is the Roman word, but what does it mean?
Well, I found a dry measure, and it's less than a quart.
Okay, a dry measure, less than a quart. How's a quart compared to a liter? Liter's a little bit smaller. So this word is between a liter and a quart. If you actually took exact measurements, they said it was a little less than a quart, a little more than a meter. Not meter, liter. And so it gives you an idea how much is there, but it's by volume, not by weight. If you get a quart of milk, do you weigh it? No, it's by volume. So right away, you just broke away from the scales. If I'm going to go to it and use it as a measuring device, it's not even how wheat was sold. So again, the text clearly, just simplistically looking at it, separates itself from the scales, or the pair of scales as it's called there, and the wheat and the barley. So does that make sense? I don't want to go too fast on this. All right? So as you're laying this out, something's going on with food, obviously. Something's going on with this writer to put hard labor or to put hardship or to dominate the people that he's over. So he came professing peace, he created war, and now he takes control, is all I keep going back to. Pat?
Is this on earth?
Yes, remember, if we keep being consistent with the parallels here, the quart of wheat is not in heaven, the quart of barley, or 3 quarts of barley, the wheat or the oil and the wine, this is all earthly things that are happening. And it's fitting the same pattern. Verse 1, heaven, verse 2, earth, verse 3, heaven, verse 4, earth, verse 5, heaven, verse 6, earth. The voice is speaking in heaven at the first part, but the products are on earth. Linda?
I just, when you said more, I wanted to go back to what we were talking about. Christ is saying this, but then you were saying the first horse and the second horse and now the third horse.
They're changing how they're functioning, how they're treating planet Earth, the rider.
But wasn't the, so it's Christ that's saying this
Here.
here.
It's the 4 living creatures that command come.
What is, and maybe I'm wrong, but what is the rider doing?
He has a pair of scales, and that's why I keep trying to stress.
But what is he,
If it fits in with like 1 Kings 12:7, he is beginning to dominate. He's been given authority to control planet Earth.
But we just said,
but
Christ steps in and speaks up and says, here's your limit.
okay.
That's all Christ is giving them is a limit, because I don't know what they would do. Even right now, if all of a sudden, and I'm not trying to pick on people politically, but if all of a sudden those in charge said a gallon of gas is $25, you just said it. And they commanded that all gas stations cannot charge less than 25. Well, the first thing they have to do is go reconfigure their pumps, because they don't go to that. So you'd have a scramble right there and a time delay. But if they said, well, they said $50 a gallon. If they really want to stop you from using gas, they can. $100 a gallon. Right? So I think what you're seeing here is Christ stepping in and saying, no, we're not going to go that far. This isn't even, I don't believe, this is a great tribulation yet. I think it's just on the beginnings of it, but I don't think it's there yet. And contrary to what's happening in the United States, this is going to be worldwide when it comes to the great tribulation. So somehow probably focus on Israel, because that's what a lot of this is what's happening here, but that's my estimate. And Christ is given a limit that restricts what this person with the scales can do. So question?
that's what I was,
Right. But the scales aren't weighing out the wheat. The scales simply represent the domination that the person has over planet Earth,
and Christ is telling you can only go so far.
is how I'm interpreting this. Now, that is an interpretation. But I've got to do something with this to make sense out of it. Because it's not the writer who's talking, it's Christ who's talking. And it's not being weighed on scales, it's being sold by volume. Yep.
Well, that kind of follows a pattern in a way of clear back to Job, where Satan wanted to do stuff to Job, and God said, okay, you can do this much and only this much.
Okay, that's a good example.
And I thought of that too.
And so that's kind of what he's doing again. He's letting the Antichrist do some, but only so much. He's still the one in control, not the Antichrist.
And that may very well fit there. So you got to make sure, and there's nothing wrong with observation, obviously, or interpretation or application. Those are all fine. But you've got to make sure you do proper observation before you can come up with an interpretation. This is where I have been led by what I believe I'm seeing. So you have to mold that around, chew it over, and decide, search the scriptures and see if Jack's right or not. But I'm throwing it out because I see things in the text that I'm not seeing anybody bringing up in the commentaries. They're trying to tie the scales in, and they kept, one of them that I was reading, a well-known commentary, must use famine 10 times. It's like they were trying to make sure when you got done, you thought this was famine. There is no famine here. Are you in a famine because your gasoline price is going up?
Not yet.
It may get harder and harder to get, but it's not a famine. And so he's making sure that, God's making sure there is no famine here. But then, and this is Jack, just to help you understand, when the fourth seal is broken, I think the fourth seal is part of the Great Tribulation. And I've taught that many times going through here. When a fourth of the world dies, you're talking about a tribulation, a pressure, a persecution, what's the other word we use for tribulation? Thalipsis is pressure on people that is unbelievable. And it's going to make the Holocaust in Europe in World War II look like nothing. Pat?
Sounds like you're talking, this third seal, this person is more like a dictator now.
Yes. And that's what I did write down in some of the handouts I gave you. that he's now moved to, not a good dictator. In fact, in my Bible, if I went back to Revelation, I think I gave it 4 titles. If you want titles there, I actually wrote them in here. He goes from being a victorious deceiver, white horse. I'll read these again. Victorious deceiver to a vicious divider, red horse, to a villainous dictator, black horse, to a violent destroyer, pale green horse. I had to use VD every time.
you and your
I know. It helps me remember things and distinguish them. Victorious deceiver, white horse. Vicious divider, red horse. Villainous dictator, black horse. Violent destroyer on the red horse. It just gives me something to kind of summarize what I'm seeing there. If I had a study Bible, I would tell you don't trust study Bibles. I think you've heard me say that enough times. I'm going to give you information, but I'm not going to try to give you something that isn't in the text. Okay. The which one? The violent destroyer. He's going to kill off 1/4 of the earth, and he's given authority to do that. Many of those are going to be believers. Many others are going to be people that just won't go along with him. I stress to you, and we've taught this many times, people think the Antichrist comes in and everybody just kind of rolls over and wants their bellies rubbed. He's such a nice guy, and he does everything perfect. It isn't like that. Satan has never been good at anything he does. He's evil and self-centered. He hates people that don't submit to him. And it shows it when he rips 3 of the horns out by the roots, 3 of the kingdoms, 3 of the kings, he's going to dominate and eliminate them. He's not a nice guy. He's evil. And a bunch of people, just like they did to Hitler, who weren't Christians, gypsies were picked on, blacks were picked on, cripples were picked on. He went through a whole list that Hitler wanted to get rid of because he was trying to create the perfect race, super race, Mein Kampf. He told everybody, told them ahead of time, years before he ever did it. Guess what some people are doing right now about America? They've already written what they're doing. And some of those books you can get a hold of and read, and you can see, you can actually see where they're at. And they have steps, and it's called Marxism. And they're working right down their steps. And they realize they've got the White House for another 2.5 years. And by the time the next president, whoever that is, gets to it, they're going to have it destroyed. And the people under oppression, like we're seeing with the black horse. Isn't that exciting? So what are you doing about it? What's the most powerful thing you can do about it?
Pray.
Pray. It's the most powerful thing you can do about anything. Your light went off, but hopefully you tap, and you're still new. You're out. So just make sure that, just tap them if you're wondering, but yours is out too. Okay, so if you're going to talk, you got to borrow a mic. But we're looking at this, and he's just laying it out here. And to me, I always, and I've told you, and I mean always, I look for the simplest, most basic idea that comes out of the text, and it comes from the grammar. It comes from the words themselves, and then it comes from the context. Putting those words together. And you realize when you start pointing stuff out, but it comes from hours of study. Yours is dead. We got 2 of them here. Oh, yours came back on. Okay, this one won't even, there it did light up. I tell you, but it goes half dead again right away. So hand it to Mark there, and he'll fix it for you. He'll either whack it on the table, or he'll put new batteries in it. One or the other. This breaks up our monotony here, and Jack is preaching at you. So, are we up to speed here? Or do you have please ask questions. Don't say I don't understand, because every question is a good question. And what you're wondering, 5 other people are wondering, and they're afraid to ask.
So,
Okay.
what was your answer under that, why carry scales? We've got control. What did you write in that spot?
I put down here, used most often to speak of slavery, bondage, and hardship. And I got that, I shouldn't tell you. I think I got that out of Bauer and Gingrich lexicon. And this is a study of the individual Greek words.
Say it again.
Used most often to speak of slavery, bondage, and hardship. I'm pretty sure that's where it came from, this Bauer and Gingrich, because then that's where I got 1 Kings 12:4 as an Old Testament example of how a yoke would be used that way. If you learn the Greek alphabet, you can use this, but it'll be a little bit time consuming. Because then you have to be able, this isn't telling you anything. Vines tells you it's a verb, noun, adjective, adverb. This does not. So you have to make sure you get to the right word. If you're looking at a noun, you're looking at a verb, it'll give you a little N or a little V. There's stuff in there, but you got to learn the abbreviations in the front to know even what some of those things represent. So if you want to put the time in, this is a great volume, but I don't always agree with him. In case I haven't told you that. This one's rare for me to go against, but I found things in there that I went, no. Bauer, Art, and Gingrich, Greek English lexicon of the New Testament. They call it BAG, B-A-G. Bauer, Art, Gingrich. And there's actually a Danker in there. I don't know if they couldn't figure out how to put his D in the word or why Danker got left out, but you can come out and look at this if you like and write it down. So as you're coming in here, he's trying to explain the second word there. Well, how much is a denarius? Okay, a day's wages for one person, common laborer. I don't know if they'd even call this our minimum wage because that's not, you wouldn't consider that a normal day's wage for a common laborer. That's usually, used to be a startup pay. Kids getting out of high school, they get a summer job, they work at McDonald's or one of those places like that. You didn't look at that and say, well, I'm going to work at McDonald's the rest of my life. Unless you had plans to become the manager or get to a position that you could move up. But so this one is what kind of coin?
Roman.
It's a Roman coin made out of? Silver. So it's a silver Roman coin. It'd probably be worth a lot more money today because it's silver and what silver has done. But it is typical day's wage for a common laborer, as I stated to you.
In my looking at quart, a dry measure, the wheat or the 3 things of barley were approximately also 1 day's food.
Right, because of the nutritious value of barley. But barley would go further to fill your stomach. If you're starving, at least you get something in there that makes you feel like you've eaten. And so for a family, if it's 1 day's food for an individual and he has a family at home, then what's he do?
He's got to work 5 jobs.
Or she's doing something at home on the side, or they have a little their own garden or field, or they're out gleaning because they're poor. But you got to find out ways to take care of yourselves. But this is just a normal routine, and it was used often enough. Some of them I found in here, a number of them I found in the. I keep encouraging you to use a Bible dictionary, but these I don't trust. I should give you my trustworthy level, 1 to 10 on each one of these.
So far, everything's been untrustworthy.
That's what I was gonna say.
No. 9 out of 10. So I give you my scale.
Okay, let me get that.
4 to 5 out of 10. I find stuff in here that is downright, what? And I mark it all up when I find it. This one, I'd give Vines an 8 out of 10. And I'm just throwing numbers out to kind of give you an idea. This, the lexicons, the reason I give 9 out of 10, and this one the same thing, and this one even higher, 9.5 out of 10, because they're dealing with the grammar. They're not trying to guess interpretations or meanings. They're just telling you what it basically means. So they're not committing themselves or giving you, but sometimes it's so skimpy, it's hard to get enough out of there. So I got to look at a whole bunch of different resources, and then I go concentrically out from the text that I do a mechanical diagram on that is in all of this paperwork here, right here. And I'll do a mechanical diagram, as I often told you. Here's verses 1 and 2. And then I'll work through them. I go through all the words. I go through the verbs, the nouns, the adjectives, the adverbs. I write all that out, and it takes a lot of time. You have to do that, or you are not going to get an accurate answer. That's what it means to search the scriptures daily. Searching doesn't mean a 2-minute glance.
Well, that's why we keep you around.
What did I tell you to do Sunday? What did you do on Monday? What did you do on Tuesday? What did you do on Wednesday? And it's to your benefit. I don't know what you read. It's between you and God. You're taking, but unless you start sharing some of that with other people, like some of you do. I get scripture sent to me by people, the great verses they found. But see, that is what encourages me. I got a call today from someone, and they had a bunch of Bible questions that I mentioned in my prayer. And when I answered things, I kept hearing things like, oh, now I understand. Because I was just taking them to text where it explains what they needed to see. And they were already doing that, but they're more in a beginning stage on some of it, and they're trying to figure it out. But then I gave them another circle, and I got them out to where I said, go look up that Bob Carnook, the one about the temple and they're excavating the temple of the Solomon, or not Solomon, but the
City of David.
City of David temple, and that the Temple Mount was not where the temple was. It's where the Roman garrison was stationed. That's a typical Roman layout for what they do for their armies. And this guy, Bob Canuck,
Whoever it was.
yeah, showed those, and he shows them in Italy, shows them wherever the Romans were. You can see the outlay. Exact same size, exact same thing, everything about it. And so the Romans had to bring an aqueduct in because that area up there has no water. And they're holding a country in slavery. So they better get their own water supply. The only water supply is in the city of David where the temple was built. The water's right there, the Gihon Spring. The priests, it was an absolute necessity for the priests. Look up water and baptism and go in the Old Testament and see how important that was when their temple was functioning. So you start putting this together and you realize I've been lied to again. They told me the temple was up there. Go study where what's the two mosques called? Al-Asqar and Dome of the Rock, as it's referred to. It has another name for the mosque. Go look at it, and you realize inside they brag about this rocky feature in the middle of it. Who would have ever put a threshing floor on a rocky outcropping? It's kind of like, hello? It had to be flat ground that the oxen could walk around a center point and thresh it, and you threw it out and made the husk go away. They never would have well, what did David buy to build the temple? Threshing floor of Ornan. So you kind of have to start looking at things and going, this isn't making sense. Well, now the archaeology, they're finding the bottom and the foundation of where the temple sat. And different features in there, and this one guy shared some of that on the YouTube broadcast. We watched it. We even watched it at men's group one night, a half hour of it, because it's so fascinating to just show you the real deal and try to explain how that's not the Temple Mount. What are they fighting over right now? The Temple Mount. The Jews that are digging up the temple are going, I'm not fighting for that.
They go at that wall,
So you've seen it too.
where the horses probably were kept.
Okay? So there's different purposes there. But you are a Berean when you search the scriptures daily, when you are diligent to present yourself approved to God, you will benefit. People want to know, well, I don't know what God's will is. I said, well, have you read this? It's all here. He'll give you principles for any decision you need to make. Anything concerning life and godliness are in there. I'm not saying don't go to doctors for physical needs. I'm not even saying don't go to brain doctors, but I'm saying watch out. Psychologists are going to get you way off track because they're not using the wisdom of God. They're using the wisdom of man, and it doesn't work. Jim?
I think his last name is Kornuk.
Ah, okay. How do you spell it?
Korn,
Okay.
K-E.
I was close. I left out the R. Cornuke.
Yeah, C-O-R-N-U-K-E.
Bob, first
First
name.
name Bob, and the one I found here is disputed by Norman Roberts, but anyway.
Yeah, you're going to find a lot of people opposing him, but how can you oppose this evidence? He's just presenting the evidence and showing it. So Bob Cornuke, C-O-R-N, Corn, U-K-E. And just look up Temple Mount on YouTube. And don't believe everything you see. But it's fascinating to see some of the historical stuff that's on there, and it's worth your time to check it out and to see what he says about it and to kind of help evaluate. But this is what you're doing with the Bible every day. This is what you're doing with the Bible right now. You're looking at this and you're just looking up words like court. Why did they translate it court? Because they got to give us something that we can visualize. Why did they say leader? Well, they probably did if they did the King James, but they weren't using a leader back 400 years ago. So anyway, they're giving you a rough idea the best they can, but a quart literally is a koinix, a dry measure less than a quart, and it's measured by volume, not by weight. You spend a day's wage, common laborer, a whole day's wage, a Roman silver coin, a denarius, to bring home a quart of wheat or 3 quarts of barley. And what was to be left unharmed?
Oil.
Okay, do not harm the oil and the wine. All right. Bauer and Gingrich, let me read for you. And this, I know you're going to have trouble finding this. So I'll tell you what, it's on page 248 because I looked it up. But I'm going to read it to you because I know this isn't going to be a common resource you're going to go to. But he is very thorough. And on page 248, I wrote it down here, letter A, which is, it's in 4 quadrants, A, B, C, D. That's how they break up the page. A on the top, B, C, D. And then it's number 3. So I go to number 3, and he says, this word, for oil is literally olive oil. That's what he tells you up front, first off. This isn't just any kind of oil. This is the olive oil. Do not harm the olive oil or the wine. And he says here on the third explanation, the effect for the cause. Means nothing to you, but there's a common Greek definition. But here's what he says. Olive orchard is what he's trying to refer to. And so he translates this, do not harm the olive orchard and the vineyard. So he's not talking about the individual product, like the wheat and the barley. He's talking about, according to Bauer and Gingrich, these scholars, that this is being used to describe more of the olive orchard and the vineyard is what's not to be harmed. All right? Now that may mean nothing at that point, but everything means something. So you keep collecting these facts as you're putting your picture together, which is why when I do my mechanical diagrams, I'm leaving more and more room between lines because I want room to write and know. I circle a word, I bring it over, I tell what the word, Greek word is, if it's a verb, what tenses it is, or whatever it may be about it, and then I fill in some of this and I pull out stuff from other places. So if it's not just oil and wine, but it really is a olive orchard and a vineyard of wine, of grapes, then why not harm it? And then we'll get down to the word harm. What are some possibilities here? What would be your logical conclusions? I'll let you be wrong and you tell me what you think it means.
Injure.
Okay, the word itself, injured, now you go into the definition. I'm just looking for more of a general idea. What does it mean, do not harm the olive orchards and the vineyards?
Damage.
Okay, do not damage.
Destroy it.
Destroy it, okay, which wouldn't make any sense when you think about it, because this is Christ speaking. Who's he speaking to?
The writer.
Probably the writer. That's the context here. Leo?
I was looking at too, olive and vineyards are a long-term
Okay.
investment, where wheat, every year you grow a new batch.
And sometimes twice a year, you'll have an early spring wheat, fall wheat. So yes, the wheat and barley come in more often and more easily, and most people can grow it, but you can't just go out and stick an olive tree in the ground and get a good harvest out of it. The ones near the Mount of Olives right now, when we went over and looked at them, they're the gnarliest things around. They're bigger, some of them are probably bigger than 3 tables put together, but holes and nooks and crannies and all kinds of weird stuff to them. And they said some of these were probably from the time of Christ. They wouldn't have been big at the time. They said they would have been little. The ones that were there at the time of Christ that were fully productive are probably gone. But they're massive trees and they live a long time. Good point. Linda?
Well, an orchard takes many years to develop, and a vineyard does the same thing, many years for the grapes to come.
At least 3 years for a vineyard
Vines to be able to give that.
to get grapes.
And so, it's what really, when we're talking about famine, he doesn't want to prevent famine to cause famine right now. He wants that oil and that wine, those vineyards and the orchards to be there for a while.
Okay, but he says if the word is harm or injure or damage, he's telling them basically you can't do anything to those orchards and vineyards. Do not damage, if that's what the meaning is. So now we go down to the meaning, and we'll back up to this explanation here. When you looked up the word harm, 91, what was the definition?
Hurt or injure.
And you got that from Strong's Concordance?
Well, I said, see Joel 1 locus.
Okay, you can find that in other places. I just wondered what your concordance actually said. No, number 91,
Vine said to injure or hurt.
right? That's what they lead toward. But the word itself, they're missing the meaning if they really say
Wrong
it.
or act wickedly.
Okay, this is the concordance. To do wrong. That's what they're translating harm. You could say, well, yeah, that fits in some cases. Act wickedly toward a tree, toward an orchard, or toward a vineyard. Why use that word? So the next question I do when I'm sometimes doing this is I ask myself, well, no, I just had it. I ask myself, okay, let me look up the word harm. And I didn't do this today. I told Bev I needed to, and I never got back to it. Look up the word harm. How many words in the New Testament are used to define harm? I got to get to the New Testament, and I see
How many different numbers?
3 different numbers. Okay? So when I go to Vines, I can look up maybe harm, might have to be hurt, might have to be damage, but I look up harm, and this is how I come to conclusions sometimes, because I have to do it for myself because my study Bible or whatever I'm using is not doing it. So I look up harm, and sure enough, they give me 4 words. So one word, kakos. You remember that word? It means evil. It's rendered harm in 2 places. Poneros. That is evil, generally a more malignant sort than number 1. It's translated harm in Acts 28:21. Those aren't common. I would say, that's not normally how you're going to translate those words. But then I look at autopos. And that says, see the word amiss. Then I see the word hubris. And what's our number here? 91. And guess what isn't here?
None of those words is 91. 91 is.
So when you look up harm in Vines, they don't even go to this word, to that word. That makes me go, wait a minute. So that right there would say they could have used different words, not the first 2. I wouldn't normally use those. But there's some other ones here that talk about injury. I didn't do another one. To do harm is combination 2 words down below. Reference to moral character, what is done evil, do. So I'm kind of, okay, so let's say, okay.
It says it's from 93.
Well, both of those are going to be connected. 91 is going to be the probably verb, and 93 might be the noun. I'm just guessing, but I go here and I say, okay, let's give them another chance. Look up the word hurt. It's under the word hurt, not under the word harm. Why did New American Standard translate it harm? Why didn't they translate it hurt? Yeah, adikeo, and it signifies intrinsically to do wrong, do hurt, act unjustly. So you're kind of going, interesting. The word dikeo is where we word diakosune is the word for righteousness. It comes from this. Dikeo is the idea of being right, being just. So why put a negative A in front of it? I know I'm giving you too much more than you want to know. But I put an A in front of it, it negates it. It undoes it. Moral, amoral. You see how that changes? That's all they're doing here. Dikeo, just. Adikeo, not just. That's what the basic meaning of the word is. So I go back to this and I ask myself, why is that being used here? Why is John using the word unjust? Or to act unjustly? To violate a law. Now I'm getting into a couple other lexicons. Act wickedly. What is he trying to get at? So I go back. What was the other one I looked up for you? No, I already did that one. That didn't help me any. Okay, I was looking for a reference I had here. But it's bringing out the idea to do injustice, to do wrong to. So you kind of ask yourself, why would Jesus, I put myself back in this scenario, I'm meditating on the word, I'm trying to understand it. Why would Jesus say you are not to harm, not to do injustice to the vineyard and the olive groves? Anything come to mind? Speaking probably to the writer who is in control with that pair of scales, the picture there, he's able to dominate. He's able to hurt or to, as we saw back in 1 Kings 12, to put this yoke of slavery upon them. What do you think Marxism does to people? I'm just picking on one religion just for you to illustrate. What does Marxism do to its people? It oppresses them. It enslaves them. It dominates them. Everybody's equal except for the elite. The ones that are causing it to happen right now will live high on the hog. They get whatever, whenever, they get to sin however they want to do, commit whatever crimes they want to commit, just like you're seeing right now in the United States. They're all getting away with it. Blatantly getting away with things. Turning right around for the same crime and putting people in jail for it. Ruining their lives. That's what Marxism is. That's what America's trying to do right now. I don't know that the Antichrist is going to be a Marxist per se, because the devil's behind it. But Marxism is an ungodly, God is unnecessary religion. And it's a religion. But you got the people at the bottom. Everybody's equal. Everybody puts in their equal time. You go to countries in the world that have been Marxist, and how well are they doing? How do they succeed? They succeed by conquering their neighbors. They don't work. They don't get productive activity out of their people. They've got to steal it from other sources so they conquer other countries, is what they do. And you can see that around the world with countries.
It's not a country thing, but Hinduism was like that too.
Hinduism.
You're born into a caste and
Yeah.
you're stuck there forever.
Okay? So again, there are a number of religions and political systems, which is why I'm not saying it has to be Marxism, socialism. There's a bunch of them, fascism, that do all the same thing. If you're in the upper elite, you're untouchable. And you can slaughter people. You can walk up to somebody and just shoot them in the head, walk away, and there's no accountability whatsoever. Nobody asks why you did that when you have the SS on your shoulder or your collar or wherever they wore it. So you're kind of getting a picture here of what's coming. The devil has done this through Assyria, Egypt, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Nazi Germany. You can see it having happened many times in the world on many different levels. The elite running, the rest of them are peons. They take care of their army really well because they let them go in and plunder and rape and pillage. They love it, especially if they hate the people and they get to go kill them and take all their stuff. They're motivated. But the peons at the bottom, the slave laborers, which Rome had, I think they said there were at least 1 million slaves just in Rome, doing everything for them. When we went up to the, what's it called? Summer Palace of the Caesar, or the ruler in Israel. No, not Mount. You know what I'm talking about. Where the Romans had to kill off the Jews, or Jews finally killed themselves. Masada.
That's right.
When they went up to Masada, that was being run by slaves. All the water that went in, we saw the baths when you walked around up there. I forget who was the guy that used that, the main top leader, the Roman leader over there. It wasn't Caesar, but it was one of their top leaders, governors. When he'd go in, he had a cold room and a hot room. All that water had to be brought up the mountainside from, who knows. I mean, you look down from up there and you don't see any rivers or lakes around there. So that's all being trekked in by slave labor, constantly being provided. And then they're in there heating it one way. I don't know how they cooled it when it's so hot around Masada and the Dead Sea and all of that. I think it was 105 when we stayed there overnight. So you're kind of looking at this whole thing and you realize it's all coming back because Satan has brought it back many times. That's how he runs things. He dominates. What did he do to Adam and Eve? Came on a white horse. Peace-loving. Came on a red horse. How did he do that? Caused them to turn on God. All of a sudden, they're fighting God. And he came on a black horse where he gets control of them. They sin against God, and now he takes advantage of them. And the product you see is Cain killing Abel. And you go, how did that happen so fast? And we watch our world and we understand why. Because the heart of man is deceitful and desperately wicked, and who can know it? So we're using up another hour for another seal, but I haven't finished explaining this to you. As you look at this picture here of not harming the oil and the wine, I think it has something to do with inflation and Marxism. I think it has something to do with the government forcing their controls on us.
You mean specifically Marxism?
Well, I'm sorry,
whatever
I shouldn't,
system.
something like that. Yeah, that I shouldn't say specifically.
Yeah.
A system like that where you are dominating. The black horse is the peaceful guy that caused war and now he's in control. And he's being told what he can do with the wheat and the barley as far as what he can sell it for, and he's being told not to harm, not to damage, not to act unjustly or to violate the ban on the oil and the wine. Why would that happen? Why would you have to put a limit on that? What are they doing right now with our oil? Not our olive oil, our car fuel. What are they doing with it?
They're trying to shut it down.
In that sense, they're acting unjustly. They are, I'm looking for the other words here to make sure, they're acting wickedly. They're violating laws in order to control us. That's an example of what I think this is trying to talk about. And so God says, you can't do that at this third horse stage. You can't do that with the oil and the wine, Antichrist. I'm not going to let you. Why? Why would God put a limit on that? Protection on that would be a better word. What's he trying to do on earth? What is his will?
That all be saved.
That everybody gets saved. Not willing that any should perish. Where's that found? 2 Peter 3:9. This is God's will. So even in the midst, and you're looking at this thing, and he does it all the way through. He lets the Jews flee out of the wilderness when Satan sends a flood after them. You think if he's going to wipe them out, he'd be able to easily wipe them out. And God opens up the ground, swallows the flood. And you think that might be figurative, and I don't think it is. Because their fleeing is not figurative. And the potential death on their part is not figurative. So the flood is real. And the ground opening up is real. It's what God's going to do. You're talking about miracles coming back? Yeah, there's going to be miracles. God can work whatever miracles he wants. But when he sets limits and he tells you what he isn't going to do, we have a lot of people today saying, well, God can still do that. But he said he wouldn't. He said he's never going to destroy Israel. Well, God did destroy Israel. Or God could destroy Israel. No, he promised he wouldn't. He's promised a lot of things about Israel, and I'm going to use up my time, and I'm out of time. Linda.
Well, I see when you go back to the wheat and the barley, there's still going to be enough to feed the.
Yeah, enough to stay alive.
And when you look at what do you use the oil for, well, to bake their breads, they put oil.
Part of it.
So, and the wine was used for cooking, they used that in cooking,
A lot of drinking.
and everything.
Watered down. It wasn't what people make out today.
So, I mean, even in Italy, my dad was born in Italy, and they didn't drink the water because the water was contaminated. It cost too much money to purify the water.
And you can make wine, right.
You know, and they drank.
But you can bring the alcohol content up on wine by certain processes. They didn't do that. They weren't purposely trying to get drunk on it.
Not for the longevity of it sitting there, that it turns more alcohol, when it's more fruit, as it's
Right.
wine.
So, but
But you need to have those things for people to continue eating.
Right.
because He didn't want the people starving yet.
no. And so God's putting limitations, and I don't know if you've seen that before, and yet you look at it now and you go, yep, that's what it says. It's the one in the center of the throne, even if it's not the Lamb. God himself somehow is putting limitations on what the third horse rider can do. And you're going, this is interesting. But he's not letting him step in. Even when he kills, why does he only kill a fourth of the earth? And when we get to the next one next week, Lord willing. Because God's putting limits on it. You see, we think he's just turning the Antichrist loose to do whatever he wants. That's not the case, ever. He's the God of this world. He's the ruler that's in charge of this world. He's never turned it over to Satan to do his will.
Would you say that this is the place then, where, because you say that the fourth seal goes into the Great Tribulation?
I believe, based on what was brought out there, that has to be part of the Great Tribulation.
But this is where he cuts it short.
At the end of that, yes.
At the end of
3 or at the end of 4?
At the end of 3?
Well, the end of 4, but see, 5 and 6 are not chronological. 1, 2, 3, 4 are following on each other. 5 is just giving you a report about the people that have died, martyred as believers, and what they're doing. And then 6 just gives you a report of what the people that are still alive on planet Earth are doing. He's not telling you there's more progression happening. He's just telling you what happened with the 4 horses. That's why there's 4 horses and not 6.
But when you say that, when he cuts it short, it's because there wouldn't be
Anybody left? Matthew 24, 22.
So this is a way to at least keep people eating something.
at the third breaking of the third seal. But the breaking of the fourth seal, you've got famine. You've got a fourth of the earth dying. So it's opened up to a whole different level with the fourth seal being broken than it did with the third seal.
Yeah, that,
But it's not famine in the third seal. Don't put the word in there. It's not in the text. It isn't what it's telling you. And it's still telling you that people are still working. Because they're working for a day and this is what they can buy with their money. But there's still limitations. There's controls with the guy with the scale. So I realized I just dumped a bunch of more things out there. You'll process it for a week. You'll come back next Wednesday night and we'll talk about it some more. Pat?
You just said 5 was a report and 6 is, are you speaking of the seals?
5's in heaven, believers martyred.
The 5th seal, when you say
The 5th seal, yes. In heaven with the believers martyred, asking God, how long, O Lord, holy and true, until you avenge us? And then you've got the 6th one being broken. So that's why I keep telling you, they're parallel each other. What's happening in heaven and what's happening on earth are simply going along. They're not trying to tell you that the two are connected in any way. They're just telling you, here's what's going on in heaven, here's what's going on earth. And that very little more is said about it. And so when they get to 5 and 6, 5th seal, 6th seal, he's just telling you, here's what's going on in heaven, period. 6th seal, here's what's going on earth, period. Because they're getting ready for the 7th seal to be broken and for this thing to finally be opened up. Once it's opened up and the words are read, now you're authorized to do what it says. And I believe this is being given to Jesus Christ to take over as the inheritor of planet Earth, as King of Kings, Lord of Lords, to reign. And whatever's in there will be spelled out, but I don't read any of the scroll in the book of Revelation. Not word for word, not quoted. Question? Okay. So believe me, I understand each one of these is just opening up a can of worms. So eat a few worms, put the rest of them in the refrigerator or let them go in your garden, but don't choke on it. Don't say, I've got to be a scholar with all of this. Just pick one of these things and say, well, I'm going to go run this down on my own. And I spend a lot of time with this book, an exhaustive concordance, comparing. I'm looking up today a number of places. Where is this word used? What other words could be used, like the word hurt there?
You didn't give us the number on that one,
On which one?
on the concordance.
Oh, 1 out of 10. That number is what she's asking about.
Accuracy.
The concordance, 9.8 out of 10. I rarely find something in there that kind of, they're pretty strict. And what you find in Vines is quoting the concordance.
Right.
You'll find that in there a lot. So they trust it. You'll find some of that. Now you find, it depends which one wrote what. This was 1800s, I think, when Strong's did this, by hand, mechanically. It would have been a major undertaking. He spent his whole life doing that.
Imagine the poor person had to type it up.
Yeah, well, and they're still doing that, but now they can transfer it from one file to another and rework it, bring it up to date. Well, they've redone it. They've redone all the font, everything to make it more readable. So somebody's going in there and changing everything. They're a modern day scribe, and you better watch out for errors. I don't know how they check for them. But anyway, there's a lot here. I would go for another couple hours. So like I told you, if you want to talk somewhere, you just hang around. But this is exciting to me because I find the truth when I let the scripture speak. I find a lot of confusion when I listen to preachers and Bible studies. Study Bibles and commentaries. I have to wade through those very carefully. I almost threw away a whole set of mine, but I said, no, it's good from the other way around. This is what everybody thinks, and I got to figure out how to show them that that doesn't work.
Well, you never know, you might need to build a fire out of it too.
Yeah, right. But some of them are dangerous, and I don't want to be dangerous. So that's why I keep telling you, I'm presenting my observations, my interpretations, sometimes my applications, but you have to figure it out for yourself, and you need to develop convictions. You don't get to sit back and pretend like you're a baby bird for 20 years, just sucking it in, pre-digested. Blech. Don't do that. You need to grow up, get off the milk, get onto the meat, and you start having your own Bible study. Invite one of your neighbors over, or a couple. That's it. Pick a topic, really simple topic, like sin. That might be too hard. You might pick a topic like Jesus would be a good topic. I can give you 100, 1,000 topics. Just one-word topics that you can pick out of the Bible. What do people want to know? Last days. That's used in the Bible. Just go look at what the Bible says about the last days. But I still like sin better. Because I go through, pick just a few verses, 5, 6 verses at the most, and you read them. Maybe the Roman road, for all of sin and come short of the glory of God. And you just open it up and say, this always was really bothered me until I made a decision about Jesus Christ. Now this is a neighbor you know, and you know they're going to be scared off by a Bible study. I mean, you get a hardcore drunk that lives next door, and he may not be interested. But I'm saying you need to make disciples. This is all we do. It's all I did in the early days of my life. Found people that knew less than me and taught them. And look where it got me. So let's pray. Father, we thank you. We have nothing to brag about. And I weep often over my sin, over, as I did yesterday, my failings as a father. All of us make mistakes, and sometimes we sin. And we need to confess that to our kids. I was joking with one of them yesterday also, just when I spanked the wrong one and had to go back and ask them to forgive me. We make mistakes, but we need to be consistent. We don't need to play games with the scriptures. We don't need to be wishy-washy, tossed to and fro and carried about by every wind of doctrine, because we're not helping our unbelieving friends around us. So give us conviction. Give us conviction based on your word, not based on the preacher or the Bible teacher. Because your word says it. Quote your word. Don't quote Jack. I mean, we help people see the truth, bring them along to know you and to grow in you, and to watch, as I've seen with some, like Mark Barrett, to see them as an unbeliever, to see them receive your son, and then to see how you've used them, as imperfect as he is, just like me. But we thank you, Father, that you're in control, that you're perfect. You never apologize to us. You've always kept your promises. You've never made a mistake. May we worship you. May we trust you. May we love you more and more as the days go by. And may people see Christ in us. We thank you for the privilege. In Jesus' name, amen.